My name is Audrey Roll. I didn't have to read that from the paper, but I'd like to welcome you all this evening to the authors event for the Free Library of Philadelphia. I'm going to thank the Free Library and Andy Cahan for having these wonderful author events, and especially for giving me the honor tonight of introducing Nell Irvin Painter. She's a brilliant historian and author who has made an acclaimed career of writing amazing works of history, which are each and every one detailed insights into ideas of gender, values, race, and culture. Nell Irvin Painter earned her BA in anthropology at the University of California at Berkeley. During her undergraduate years, she studied French medieval history at the University of Bordeaux, France. She also studied abroad at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana. In 1967, she completed an MA at the University of California at Los Angeles. In 1974, she earned an MA and a PhD at Harvard University. Painter has received honorary degrees from Dartmouth College, Wesleyan University, Yale University, among other institutions. She received a Candace Award from the National Coalition of 100 Black Women in 1986. She served as president of the Organization of American Historians, and she also served as president of the Southern Historical Association. As the Edwards Professor of American History Emerita at Princeton University, Painter returned to school at Mason Gross School of the Arts at Rutgers University, where she received a BFA in art in 2009. She then earned an MFA in art from Rhode Island School of Design. She is here tonight to share her new book with us, which is a wonderful first memoir, Old in Art School, a memoir of starting over. It celebrates her journey from a brilliant career as an historian to an art student at the age of 64 years old. Please welcome Nell Irvin Painter. Enjoy, and thank you again.
It's very, very nice to be back in Philadelphia. I started as a historian in Philadelphia in the 20th century at Penn. And I stayed here from 1974 to 1980. And then I went to North Carolina, and then I went to Princeton, where I met Cheryl Hicks, who's sitting there with my husband. Cheryl was one of my PhD students. Hey, Cheryl! So, as Audrey has told you, I spent a lifetime as a historian. And I wrote 7 books, edited 2 Penguin Classics, and became the president of the historical associations I was associated with. And then it kind of got toward retirement time. And then the question was, what to do next? How many of you have asked yourself this question? Okay. So if we had known each other, you would have said to me as I was saying what to do next, you would say, well, I'm not sure what to do next either. Maybe my knitting, but I knit all the time too. So I had an inspiration, and that was from my mother. Do any of you already have copies of the book with you? Okay, let's find the picture of my mother. She's early on. She's on page 20. That's my mother with her second book. My mother retired at age 65. She had been an administrator in the Oakland Public Schools. She hired and fired public school teachers. And she had seen me and my friends doing the things that we enjoyed so much, which was writing books. And she said, I think I'd like to write a book. So she wrote a book. It took her 10 years to write the book and get it published. And it was called The Unsung Heart of Black America, a title from her publisher. It was really about the nice middle-class black people who were our friends. And then she decided to write another book. And the picture you have on page 20 is the cover of her second book. And for those of you who don't have it, it's called I Hope I Look That Good When I'm That Old. That's what people said to her all the time. And now they're saying it to me. Which reminds me, I want to say a word about old. So when I decided to call this book Old in Art School, people would say, oh, you're not old, you're older. And I'd say, no, I'm old. And you know, old, let's see, this is a 20th century crowd. You'll know what I'm talking about. So there used to be a word called black. And it used to be a really bad thing to call somebody. Remember that? If you call somebody black, it was like an insult. It was a terrible thing to say to somebody. The right thing to call them was Negro. And then in the 60s and 70s, we got Black Power, and black is beautiful, and black is wonderful. And then black got to be a good thing. And in fact, James Brown made a hit record called Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. So I say it loud, I'm old and I'm proud. So that's why this book is called Old in Art School, not something softer. And I hope that those of you who are of a certain age and are thinking about the next step will also embrace being old, because being old is different from being young. When you look at the iconography, the images around you, the advertisements, the news, everybody is young or youngish. Even the old people are young. The old people are like 50. So, but once you get to be old, things settle down. The things that you used to worry about so much, that is, the things that you came up with, the things you worried about in your youth, they fall away. You get some new things to worry about when you're old, but the things you used to worry about kind of fall away, and life settles down. It's old people are happier. However, this old person was not happier in art graduate school. I started writing this book because when people like you said to me and we talked about it, it was like, what's next? And I would say, well, my mother started writing books when she was 65, so I know you can do something different. And when I was an undergraduate at Berkeley, when I was a kid, I would draw. And I always liked visual things. I always liked drawing. And as a historian, knitting was the thing that I did for the eye and for the texture and for the beauty of things. So I thought, I could go back to that. So I gave it a try. I did 2 introductory painting classes at Princeton before I left. And these were good. I enjoyed them. And some of the paintings that I made in that class are in this book. This book has 95 images in it. 2 of them are my parents, because they're part of this book too. But all the rest are the art that I made as I went along. So it's like a work in progress of the art. The early art and some of the later art is so-so, but that is to say, this is where I was then, and this is what became of it. So you can see as you go through this book, the changes in the eye and the hand. So it really is work in progress. So I did 2 introductory classes at Princeton, and then I did what's called the drawing and painting marathon at the studio school. So I would, in A Street in New York, and we live in Newark, New Jersey. So I would get up 6:30 in the morning, I'd go across Branchbrook Park, I'd take the light rail, I'd get to Newark Penn Station, I'd take New Jersey Transit, and then I'd take the subway, and then I'd walk to the New York Studio School. I was the first one there. And I was the last one there, too. You know, the kids would come, and they'd paint for a while, and they'd leave their brushes, and they'd leave early and stuff. But I was really good. I did it the whole time, and I thought, I can do this. I really like this. I really enjoy doing this. And there are a couple of the paintings that I made in the studio school area. So, okay. So my wonderful husband said, okay, you can do it. Go ahead, do it, do it. So I did. First, I was an undergraduate at Mason Gross School of the Arts at Rutgers in New Brunswick. And now Rutgers is the State University of New Jersey. We live in New Jersey. Have you ever heard of New Jersey? Well, you're probably Pennsylvanian, so you may have heard of New Jersey. But if I were speaking to a New York audience, you would say, is that near Alaska? So I talk a lot about New Jersey because in art, there are two different worlds. New Jersey, well, there's New Jersey and the rest of the world, and there's New York. And if you live in New York and you draw and paint, you are an artist. And if you live in New Jersey and you draw and paint, you are a local artist. So I am a local artist. And my book is full of New Jersey because people don't appreciate New Jersey. People do not appreciate New Jersey enough. So 3 years at Mason Gross School of the Arts. I got a BFA in painting, and I'm simplifying here. And then I went to graduate school at the Rhode Island School of Design. So being an undergraduate in painting was rather enjoyable. I learned a lot. As an undergraduate, you get to learn a lot. As an undergraduate, it's like being young again and ignorant. And people teach you things. When you're a graduate student, you're supposed to know things. And I didn't know things. So this book starts out pretty much with my mother and being encouraged and being an undergraduate and learning a lot of things. So in a sense, it's a Bildungsroman. It's a book about education. So I talk about some artists. It's not an art history. It's the artists that I knew and I looked at and who became important for me. So that was the undergraduate part. And then there was the graduate part, and that was much more dramatic. So I want to read you two parts. I want to start with what comes first in the book, even though in the saga, it's kind of in the middle. And it's called Prologue. You'll never be an artist. Now, let me give you a little background here. Out there for sale, you have two books of mine. One is my famous book, which is called The History of White People. And the other one is this book. Now, this is the first time I am seeing this book, and you are the first people I am talking to about this book. Thank you. So you will see this book, and if you buy it, I'll sign it for you. And but The History of White People came out while I was at the Rhode Island School of Design. I do not recommend this. So my other books had been respectably and respectfully recognized. They were all reviewed in the New York Times Book Review. They got book review. Everything was fine. But they didn't change my life. The History of White People changed my life. First of all, it was reviewed on the front page of the New York Times Book Review. While I was in art school. So that's the backdrop of the prologue, You'll Never Be an Artist. The world of the Rhode Island School of Design and the world of my former academic life rarely overlapped. But some RISD people, like my printmaking teacher, Rhonda, inhabited both realms and didn't pretend my book didn't exist. Chatting with her in Benson Hall one day after our printmaking class, I seized a rare opportunity in art school to brag about my writing. To wit, my Sunday's morning wonder of wonders, my book reviewed on the front page of the New York Times Book Review. The New York Times Book Review. Front page review. Oh, la 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 la. Rhonda recognized this as every writer's dream, a once-in-a-lifetime, true-to-life coup. She ran me downstairs to share my miracle with her teacher colleague, Sharon. Passing the printmaking office on our way to Sharon, we ran into teacher Henry, standing outside the doorway of his faculty office, a distraction from wonder, the reminder of a beef. Teacher Henry had given me an A-, bad graduate student grade, and called me dogged. A put down, not an appreciation of persistence. Recognizing an insult, I had called him out over dogged. Henry's malevolent magnetic field pulled me off course. Instead of rejoicing over my amazing good fortune with Sharon and Rhonda, I resumed my fight with Henry. This was stupid of me, now I know, even though I was right and he was wrong. Henry did not back down. He doubled down. He insisted he had to say what he believed, what he knew to be true. You may show your work, you may have a gallery, you may sell your work, you may have collectors, but you will never be an artist. Why not? Because I lacked an essential component, some ineffable inner quality necessary to truly be an artist. I recognized Henry's logic of being as complete, unalloyed bullshit. I said, Henry, that's bullshit. I knew it was totally unprofessional of him, a teacher, to say that to me, a student. I knew that from a career of teaching, from a lifetime of knowing teacher-student relations. I knew, as surely as I was right and he was wrong, I knew. What I felt was something as different as heart from brain. What I felt was Henry's arrow of condemnation piercing my student's psyche. He hurled an arrow, a dagger, a sharp-pointed weapon into my bullseye of a heart, where it lodged among 1,000 insinuations of doubts that in fact I was not good enough. That arrow target, the assault and the wound, the target of my doubt shape-shifted into an Escher loop of insecurity and self-pity. Never be an artist, not good enough. Never be an artist, not good enough. Never be an artist, not good enough. You may recognize this circuit of torture. Henry cut me so deeply because part of me, while I was in graduate school, the larger part of me, wanted to be an artist in just that indescribable way. And an artist finds her identity in art, does nothing but make art, and does it all the time, making work of unimaginable creativity. An artist makes art 100% of the time. I would have loved to devote all my time to art, to pursue each inspiration to its fabulous ends. but I also didn't want to leave book promotion or writing tasks or my dear husband in New Jersey. I wished I didn't always have to cringe when the phone pretended parental emergency from the West Coast. But my parents were part of me, a part I could not even imagine letting down. I could not abandon the rest of me, not even when the rest of me overwhelmed my art. I wanted to be a better artist and make more exciting work with never-before-seen drawings and hitherto unimaginable compositions and color from the ends of the earth. Part of me wanted to be an artist without any asterisks. All of me wanted to be an artist, and yet, at the same time, to keep my past as a thinker and a writer. But how could I be an artist when academic was so poisonous a concept in art, and while I had always been academic? The very worst thing in the world you could call someone's art was academic, meaning sterile, humorless, obscure, unattractive, and old-fashioned. Old. An artist's art is ambiguous and ironic, possessing what teacher Roger called right nowness. I was doing my darndest for ambiguity and irony with mixed results, but right nowness? I was too old for right nowness. Teacher Donna faulted me for not being hungry enough to be an artist. I asked myself, what on earth is hungry if not moving to another state, paying a fortune in tuition, rent, and supplies, working endless hours, and being humiliated on a daily basis? What an art world funhouse of jumbled upside-down values. Donna's condemnation stung because Henry's resonated, and I was vulnerable to both. Meanwhile, my upbringing, long life's experience, and scholarship had armored me against thinking of identity, racial or gender identity, as something you are, or as academics would say, as something ontological. Knowing identity as something people performed in various ways, I was armored against racial and gender essentialism, as academics would say, of something simple and unitary. Yet here I was, falling for essentialism about artists. Henry's definition of an artist was ontological, as in to be, rather than epistemological, as in to learn, or pedagogical, as in to teach, or performative, as in to act, or even commercial, as in to have a gallery. He was saying that since anything can find its way into a gallery, and taste varies so widely that just about anything can find a buyer, an inexpressible something, some inward quality of being hard to pin down and beyond the market, must therefore exist on the exciting side of a line separating an artists from inferior beings, i.e., me. To be an artist was to be a certain kind of person that you could not become through education or practice. It was a toggle switch between either you were or you weren't. If I was never going to be an artist, my last few years were a terrible mistake, a waste of time, and a very great deal of money. If I lacked the essential quality of being an artist, I was condemned to failure. My defect was my seriousness, my persistence, my discipline, and my goddamn hard work. In other realms, these are the foundations of resilience, a positive quality in life essential for survival. Survival, however, does not figure among the qualities of an artist. How much more attractive to go down in flames at a young age, like Jean-Michel Basquiat or Arshile Gorky. I remembered Skinny White Matt, my skateboarder classmate at Mason Gross, who made awesomely huge, extraordinary, imaginative pieces by staying up the night before the piece was due. Totally amazing work, but hardly a routine for the decades. All the better to die young. Too late for me. So that's where I begin. And I go through many pages. Many pages. I get a BFA, my mother dies, kind of at the same time. I make a terrible mistake and go to graduate school before I should because I'm feeling that my time is short, and I only realize years later that I felt that way because my mother was dying. Why didn't I just go to the web? And the web would have told me, don't make an important decision when your mother dies. I made an important decision, and it was the wrong one, but I survived it. Then I went to graduate school, and I was humiliated, as I told you, and I was a pathetic little nub for 2 years. However, there was kind of a little corner for this pathetic little nub, this artist's pathetic little nub, who wrote this incredible book, The History of White People. And I became the expert on white people. I am still the expert on white people. But it was a hard struggle those last years in particular, because graduate art school is a kind of a tearing down. And being old is a hard place to be in the world of youth. The art world is besotted by youth, and I was not young. So sometimes you might wonder, here I am, a black woman, why didn't I call this book Black in Art School or Black Woman in Art School? Because there were black people in art school, and there were other women in art school, and there were even very successful artists who were black women. But it's much different when you are old. And so old was my salient identity as an art student, and in a certain way, it still is. So I want to end by reading you most of the coda at the end, and it's called Happy Ending. Did you know that was a German expression? Happy ending. It's German. So, yes, I did finally transcend my art school unsettling and move past pathetic insecurity. When others overlook or turn away from my art, I no longer feel belittled. But transcendence has not come once and for all. So many times I had freed myself from the gaze of others, from their judgments and expectations of an artist so ill-suited as me, only to lose sight of myself as I am and return to self-doubt. Thanks to an interview with the journalist Zahra, I grasped a solution that still works. Zahra joined a stream of visitors to my Newark Ironbound studio. We talked for hours in a conversation that turned, as such conversations do, from my talking about me and my work to my listening to her talk about herself. I'm not 80 years old yet, but younger women already consult me for advice on getting through life. Lamenting American society's hostility toward black women in particular toward black women with dark skin like hers and mine, Zahra trembled distress. She judged herself a little darker than me, a difference I could not see. Zahra, with roots in the Caribbean islands, was able to calibrate fine gradations of skin color, an ability I missed growing up in California. I recognized her anguish, though my own version replaced skin color with age. I sought to assuage her pain. I gave Zahra advice against my own wisdom. I usually don't give people advice before they ask for it, specifically because people don't usually want advice. They want to complain. I gave Zahra advice anyway. I told her she absolutely must not see herself through other people's eyes. Great advice. Zahra needed that advice. She might even have heeded it. But let's be candid here. The person who needed to hear and to heed that advice was me. I did hear, I did heed. I grew up into who I am as no other. This is not something I could do just one time and have it work forever. Like artists the world over, my bayoneted hand-to-hand struggle against insecurity and for self-confidence never ends. I have to take my own advice and shoulder my armament every single day. Every single day, not only to close the eyes of disparagement, but also to stop my ears against adulation, not to see myself through other people's eyes, to remain what the gurus call centered. When practiced every day, this works, more or less, with regard to myself and my own artwork of artist books so far outside popularity, and also to accept as part of my practice my day job of talking and commenting that grows out of my career as a historian. I'm an artist who lives and works in Newark, New Jersey, an artist whose other, not as I once said, former, lives as a historian and as a daughter are still crucial parts of me. I am a wise old person, not a hot young artist, not a young anybody with a young anybody's future before me. I know the value of doing my work, and keeping at it. I do keep at it in the pleasure of the process of making the art only I can make. Serious artist? Yes. I make and show my work regularly. Professional artist? Yes. I get paid for my work. An artist? Probably not, probably never, because I still do other things. Do I miss not being an artist? Yes, a little, but not enough to live my life any other way. Thank you.
I think what I wanted to know is that in all of the searchings for, I know I'm trying to recreate myself at 65. I think you more or less answered it, because to know how to go into the next round, this is just not the end, it's the beginning. Well, so I thoroughly understood the title. Yeah. It's the starting over. Yeah. So that's what I would have asked you. How did you come about with some idea of how you were going to start over? And it sounds to me like it's an acknowledgement of being older, or old. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's an acknowledgement of actually being old, but also inspired by my mother. I don't know if I could have done it without my mother's example, and I know I couldn't have done it without my husband's support.
Hi, I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.
You're talking about several intersections of different things. I got interested after retirement in metal sculpture, welded sculpture. And as a sociologist, I know what a good sociology study looks like, and I know what a bad one looks like. In the field of art, not only do I not know, I don't think it's known. And there was a sculptor who died at the age of 59. His name was David Smith.
Yes.
He died in a car accident. And he became great because a reviewer, an art critic named Clement Greenberg,
Yes.
said he was great. He became great. When he was making his work, and before Greenberg, kind of highlighted his career, he wasn't great. His work didn't change a whole lot. It did change a little bit with regard to Greenberg's encouragement. I'm thinking that when you have a field that is so subjective as art, which is to say if it's Clive Bell or another critic, and they like it, then it's good. See, I have been on sort of two missions at once. One is I just put on my helmet and fire up my torch,
Yes.
and I make stuff.
You do it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I just do it. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. In fact, it's completely irrelevant. I just do what I like. On the other hand, I'd love to know what good art is. I don't know if it's a urinal, on its side.
Which it has been.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know whether it's a bunch of wrapped pieces of candy
Which it also is.
in a corner. Yes.
Yes.
I don't know if it's 83 cans of shit.
Which it has been.
Yes, and the
Yes.
cans are not sealed properly, I might add.
Yeah.
Therefore, they blow up.
Yeah.
I'm sure you must have tried to figure out what good art
Yes.
means.
Yes.
And is there a way, it's just like drinking wine, can you try different kinds of wine blindfolded, say this is a good wine?
Yes. Yes, you can. A lot of what is in this book is trying to answer that kind of question. You've inserted a lot of hints, a lot of markers of art history, and I'm not going to go to them. I just want to say to everybody else who is not an artist and is not an art historian that the name Clement Greenberg was a very famous critic who did make and break careers, 20th century critic. And David Smith still is seen as a very great sculptor, though his work strikes some of us as rather sterile. And the fashions in art change as time goes by. So as in many other parts of human life, things change in art. And part of what kept me so off balance, like you, was coming out of an academic world, which is not perfect in terms of its criteria, but which has some and kind of holes to them. So if you get your PhD, you know what to do, and you know what the markers are. In art, it seems pretty much that the market does the marking, and the market changes. But what Henry was telling me about an artist was, even if you succeed in the market, I still could not be an artist. So there was something beyond that. And whenever I tell people about that incident in my life, people tell me, whether they're my age and they were women artists in the 70s, or they're artists today, they're poets, people who went to MFA for creative writing or for theater, that in art the criteria are so murky. And that's why I say, do not try to look at yourself through other people's eyes. I do feel that the more work you do, the better you get at it. And you can look at your own work and the work of others and find that your eye prefers the work of experienced artists over that of neophytes. Part of it is the confidence, part of it is the depth in painting, the thickness of the paint, and the confidence of the compositions. But your basic issue of the lack of criteria, to which I would add the worship of youth, makes it kind of unsettling for those of us who come into it from another world.
From your background, your writing and all of the research you had to do, was there a certain kind of artwork that you gravitated towards? I know you have a collage of the Penn Station in
Yes.
Newark.
Yes.
And I thought
I
that
did a
was
lot
really
of art
nice.
of Penn Station because I spent a lot of time in Penn Station, Newark, Penn Station, Newark. And actually, I did not design this cover, but I feel like it really speaks to who I am as an artist, because the collage, this is my art in the background there, and the collage is what I cut up from the manuscript of the history of white people. And so the history of white people and history was really a bedeviling part of my education as an artist. And now I embrace it. I still make artwork by cutting up my manuscripts or other people's manuscripts and collaging them. So we old artists bring much more into our art and into our eyes. Now, you ask about the kind of art I make. It changes over time. So, for instance, my eyes were formed in the 20th century, and I soon learned in art school that my greatest handicap were my 20th century eyes. That if your taste is formed in the 20th century, for me, it was an artist like Ben Shahn, for instance. Any of you know Ben Shahn? Yeah, a few of you do. Charles White, the great 20th century, some of it social realist, but political art, and then also abstract expressionism, not necessarily the extremes, not the Pollocks, but that kind of active art and high charged color. But I found as I went through the years that my taste changed. So recently I read a memoir of an artist I just loved when I was at Mason Gross, R.B. Kitai, who's a painter, an American painter who made his career in Britain. A fantastic painter, really a virtuoso painter, draftsman. But I found that I no longer loved the work. So taste changes, at least my taste changed. And I realized that what I make, work like this, and I make artist books, this is not fashionable work at all, but it's the work that gives me great satisfaction. So I make my work.
When we talk about old, I like to say that the creative process is eternal and it's timeless. Mm-hmm. You have artists you had artists like Picasso that painted till he was 92. The hottest artist in the world, Gerhard Richter, is 68. He was 68, and he's created 1,600 paintings.
Yes.
And he's
And
worth
some of them are
valued at
junk.
$40 million, the highest paid artist in the world, and he's 60, and he's over 68.
Yeah.
Romeo Bearden paid until he was 87. So I'm saying that creativity, imagination, the creative process itself is timeless. Picasso's paintings still sell for $100 million, even though he's been going 100 years. So I'm just saying, what are your comments on that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that if you keep working, it keeps going. You have to keep working. But about Picasso, this is not quite to your point, but Picasso lived a very long life. He was like 92 or something like that when he died. And as you say, he was working until he died. Glenn and I were in Paris in the 90s, I think. And there was a big, there's always big Picasso exhibitions. But this was Picasso in his old age. And you know, we think of him as the world's greatest painter in his old age, which was like in the 50s and 60s. He was wretched. He felt like the world had passed him by and nobody knew him anymore. You know, I'm telling you about my 20th century eyes. He would probably tell people about his before the First World War eyes. So even though we can look at work and say, yes, the creation goes on, but if you get right down into it and talk to the artist, sometimes the artist feels differently at different points in the life. But I love what you said about Romare Bearden, whose work changed over, I mean, many artists do this, but his was particularly striking, I think, when working with colleagues in Spiral, he discovered, or he suggested that they all make collage together. He was the only one who kept doing it, but it was a genius of creation. Those are fantastic works of art. One last thing, Gerhard Richter, whom I talk about here, because his way of working, his use of projectors, which is hidden, he doesn't talk about it very much, but he was very important to me in discovering one way for me to work as well. So he does paintings that are figurative. Those are the very well-known ones. And then he also does abstract paintings, which he calls abstraktes Bilder, abstract pictures. And these he does by the gross, and they look like it.
I'm just wondering, why art? I mean, you get to a certain point where you're trying to decide what you want to do next. What brought you to art? Why not singing or, anything else? What brought you to art? Or even fashion design. You say you knit.
Yeah.
You knit, design sweaters.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
curiosity.
Taste what I like to do. I don't like to sing. I like to draw. And, I had drawn in the past. I was drawing in my past, and it was the tug of the eye and the tug of the hand. Those were with me from my youth. So that's what I wanted to do. But one thing that I really like about art, I still do, is that I'm not bound by the archive in a way we scholars are. When you're a scholar, you have to respect the archive. You go into the archive, and if the archive says things you don't like, you can't say, oh, I'm going to pretend that shit's not there. You can't do that. You can't do that. You have to take it into account. You have to deal with it. You have to tell the truth. In art, you don't have to. I could say whatever I please. I can make whatever I please. Some of my work is abstract, and it has no meaning. Some of it has meaning that I put in. So I'll go back to this, for instance, these pieces of manuscript. If you knew the book they came from, you would kind of have a sense of the chapter. But that's not why these pieces are here. They're here because the arrangement and the colors and all that was something, as artists would say, these are purely formal decisions. It's how it looks. So I was pleasing myself.
I thought it was interesting that in the book there are self-portraits.
There are a lot of
number of the
self-portraits,
self-portraits.
yeah.
So I thought maybe that was a
Yeah.
function of your struggle with changing or starting over. I thought maybe.
I don't think it means, I mean, in my undergraduate career, I didn't have black models. And I thought I was going to paint figuratively, and so painting figuratively, I would be painting some dark skin. Dark skin is reflective in a way that light skin isn't. So you can't just take like brown and paint it over a nose or a face or something like that. It calls for certain skills. So I happened to have a very handy model. So that was part of it. And the other part was that I didn't have to worry about if I drew you and you would be displeased. I can draw me any way I want.
At what age did this journey of transition begin, and at what age was your aha moment of peace with this change?
I began when I was 64. And this book now starts with You'll Never Be an Artist, but in the first drafts, the beginning was the beginning, and the chapter was called How Old Are You? Because that was like the first thing people said to me at Mason Groves. How old are you? And people kept asking me how old I was. It was a question that people wanted to know, how old are you? So I kept saying. And I graduated when how old was I when I graduated from RISD? 65? No, 69? Was that old? Well, 69, he says, and he tells the truth.
Thank you so much for your inspiring and moving and
Thank
really
you.
wonderful talk, and look forward to reading the book. I know this is a really odd question, but would you like to have a conversation and talk about this book at Rhode Island School of Design?
There is the possibility. This is a long answer. I am on the board of the New York Foundation for the Arts, and one of my fellow board members is an artist who is married to the head of the Board of Trustees of RISD. And I have had dinner with him, and he wants me to talk to the trustees. In a roundabout way, some current RISD students half approached me through a former student whom I don't know, who graduated after I left, and they said, would you talk to us? And I basically said no. Maybe later. I mean, they should read the book first.
I was just curious, when you were beginning your quote-unquote academic career,
You mean
What-
back in the 60s?
yeah, was the idea of becoming an artist and applying to art schools an idea that you had, and because of pressures either from your parents or just thinking of what would turn out more financially reliable, you chucked it? And whichever way that is going to be answered by you, if you could flip your life around and find that you had gone to art school earlier and then grew into the academic later, I wonder, at least you could have had the art school experience of a young person in art school that you didn't seem able to access given that you were old.
Oh, right. Actually, I was an art major for a little while at Berkeley, but I got a C in sculpture. I didn't do any work in my sculpture class. I loved drawing. I always drew very well. I never had to work at drawing. And I took that attitude into my sculpture class, and I made a piece of shit. And I got a C. And I thought, well, that proves I don't have enough talent. That was how we thought in the 60s, that talent is everything. And either you have it or you don't. And if you don't have talent, you don't. Now I realize I should have just done some work. I should have just learned something and done something. I come from an academic family. My parents never pressured me to be anything. And they even kept a little house for me in Oakland. I'm from Oakland. In case when I was actually, even through the time I was a full professor, I just wanted to throw it all over and go home. So, and I almost got to the point of wanting to in the 80s, but I didn't. But so, my parents are quite the opposite. They were very supportive all along. When I was in high school, I took drawing classes at the California College of Arts and Crafts with another student named Margot Humphrey. And she remained in art. She is a distinguished printmaker. And we actually own a couple of pieces of her work. I think I am careerist enough to have, I probably would have been really frustrated being a woman artist in the 20th century, because those women worked and worked and worked. And I'm just talking about white women artists at this point. You add in black women artists, and you work and work and work and work and work, and if you can keep going until now, like Howardina Pindell, for instance, now you might be able to be recognized as the kind of artist you really are. But it would have been a long time in the wilderness. I asked Pat Steer, who's a painter, who's I think a little older than I am. She's my age, let's say. And she kept going all those years. And I said, you know, Pat, how did you do it? And she said, sheer spite. And Howardina Pendell has written in the same way. She says, I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of driving me out. And Margot Humphrey continued, but one of the painters I admire very much, Anne Lovelace O'Neill in Berkeley, is a fantastic painter, never got her due. So I think, I don't know if I'd ever think that I would call academia a level playing field, but in comparison, but also, and here I'll stop, I thought about what would happen if Henry had said to me as a young person, you'll never be an artist. And people told me stories about other young artists who were crushed, who left art, and I'm talking about white men even, who just took it to heart. So in that sense, I'm glad I was old and I had the ego strength of an older person to know, Henry, that's bullshit.
Is this the end, or will you make another start over? Do you have a passion for something else you'd like to do in life?
No, this will do. But I do have another project in mind that pulls together art and history. And that is around the history and the imagery and the heritage tourism and history and memory around Emmett Till. So, but that can't start until 2019.
All right. Well, if you all have questions, you know, you can meet her in the lobby as she's citing her books, and maybe that'll be your occasion to ask her a question if I didn't give you a chance to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
Nell
so
Painter.
much.
Nell Irvin Painter.
Thanks.
Thank you.